I welcome you to the Top 10 channel. Subscribe to the channel, put a like, and we start the next top. 10 hunters who became the hunted. Hunting has been a part of American culture since the first settlers arrived, with many families passing along the tradition from generation to generation. It's a favorite sport for some, since it allows them to experience a sense of freedom and calm while alone in the outdoors. When the hunter becomes the pursued, though, that peace can be shattered permanently. The guys in the following 10 examples unwittingly walked into the belly of the beast, never to return. The deer. Paul Smith, a 62-year-old Indiana man, was hunting deer at Chino Lake State Park in 2011. He left a message on his son's voicemail about 9:00. About a battle he had just had with a deer. Smith recalled descending down from his tree stand after shooting the deer only to discover that it was still alive and prepared to fight to the death. Smith claims that he and the deer struggled physically before Smith brought out a knife and stabbed the animal to death. Smith called park officials after receiving the voice message because he wanted assistance bringing the deer's body to the park's check-in station. When park officers came, they discovered Smith unconscious beneath a tree, which shocked them. CPR was used to try to resuscitate Smith. They also tried to restart his heart with a portable defibrillator. Smith was pronounced dead at the spot, but it was too late. Smith was covered in bruises from his encounter with the deer, according to the autopsy report. The animal appears to have kicked Smith, causing internal bruising and laceration of his liver. This eventually resulted in his death. Hungry hippos. Spencer Tyron was sitting in his canoe near the beaches of Lake Rukwa in Tanzania, armed with his rifle, hunting for sport. The sound of shooting may have driven some wildlife to flee the area, attracting the attention of other wildlife hidden beneath the muddy water. Tyron's canoe was flipped over by a hippopotamus before he realized what had happened, leaving him vulnerable to the very animals he was hunting. Tyron was attacked by the hippo, who bit off his shoulders and head. A South African man named Marius Else was killed by his pet hippo, Humphrey, months later, when the 1,200-kilogram animal attacked, biting and gouging him to death. Hippos, to many people's surprise, are among Africa's most unpredictable and dangerous animals, as well as one of the most feared. Hippos, in fact, are responsible for the greatest number of wildlife attacks on humans in South Africa, killing more people than all other animals combined. Hippos, the world's third largest animal with a roar as loud as a lion, are known to bite, stomp, and charge at people, terrorizing Africa while murdering the unwary and misinformed. Rattlesnake. Dick Rupert, 68, was hunting with his 12-year-old grandson in the Georgia woods in 2009. Rupert was descending from a tree stand at 7:30 when a rattlesnake bit his calf. Rupert's grandson rushed to his rescue. When the grandson realized the gravity of the situation, he attempted to drive Rupert to a main road on the back of his ATV, but Rupert tumbled off the ATV twice. Rupert was unconscious and heading into cardiac arrest by the time his grandson managed to drag him to a road. When paramedics arrived, the grandson had already started CPR, but it was in vain. Rupert was pronounced dead at the hospital an hour later. Following his death, Georgians were reminded of the hazards of rattlesnakes, particularly considering the time of year. Rattlers don't pose much of a hazard during the hot and winter months because they prefer to hibernate until the weather is warm. People should be very cautious during that time, especially in woodland areas. The bear. Stephen Stevenson, 39, of Winnemucca, Nevada, and his companion, Ty Bell, 20, were hunting black bears in northwest Montana in September 2011 when they found their prize. Bell shot and wounded a baby grizzly bear after mistaking it for a black bear. The bear did not, however, collapse to the ground right away. Instead, it sought shelter in the woods. Bell and Stevenson went out in search of their prey, eventually tracking the injured animal to a secluded location with thick cover. The pair went to claim their kill, believing the grizzly was dead, not realizing the bear was still alive and quite angry. Stevenson was mauled by the bear as it charged toward him. Bell fired multiple shots in an attempt to save his comrade at that point. The bear was slain in a matter of seconds, and Stevenson was dead. Despite initial reports that Stevenson had been mauled to death by the grizzly, an autopsy report eventually revealed that Stevenson died of a gunshot wound from Bell as he sought to stop the bear's attack. Bell was cleared of any wrongdoing in Stevenson's death. Friendly fire. Charles Bruce, a 52-year-old volunteer firefighter with the Malvern Fire Department on Long Island, was on a weekend hunting trip with fellow firefighters, including his best friend and coworker, in 2013. On a late Saturday afternoon, Bruce had decided to call it a day and was leaving the wooded area when bullets were fired from a distance of 50 meters. Bruce was hit in the chest and died on the spot. Robert Gerbino, Bruce's best friend and fellow volunteer firefighter, was the gunman. Gerbino told authorities that he mistook Bruce for a deer and accidentally fired his weapon. However, given that he couldn't discern the difference between a deer and a human being, authorities considered his assertions alarming and difficult to accept. The following year, Gerbino was charged with criminal negligent homicide. At his arraignment, he pleaded not guilty, and the case is still pending. The buffalo. Owain Lewis, a professional hunter for Chifuti Safaris, was hunting with a client in Zimbabwe's Chuar North concession in June 2012 when his greatest nightmare came true. The injured buffalo retreated into the desert after the hunting group fired a shot at it from a distance. Lewis urged, as a professional, that he and his client track down the buffalo, no matter how long it took. The men discovered the injured animal on the ground 3 days after the initial shooting. The two took aim and fired. The buffalo, on the other hand, was still alive and ran a little distance before coming to a halt in a clearing. Lewis shot at the buffalo with his final round in the chamber, but it was ineffective. The animal rushed Lewis this time, goring him and flinging him aside like a rag doll. Lewis passed away on the spot. The buffalo was shot multiple times by the other hunter before it was ultimately killed. Those who had known, worked, and hunted with Lewis poured in their support in droves. He was described as very skillful, knowledgeable, and experienced by some. Following Lewis' death, a memorial account was established in his honor to assist his widow, who was in financial need. African poachers. The demand for ivory in China has risen dramatically over the years, resulting in a rising dilemma as poachers seek out elephants for their skin and tusks. When the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species temporarily relaxed the restriction on the sale of illegal ivory in 2007, the problem became even worse. In truth, poachers murdered at least 100,000 elephants in Africa between 2010 and 2012. Armed poachers shot and killed an elephant on private grounds on Choke Ranch in southern Kenya in 2015. Unlike the previous instances, the hunters in this case were pursued by wildlife rangers who arrived on the site shortly after. The rangers were also armed, much to the dismay of the poachers, and a gunfight ensued shortly. One of the poachers was killed in the end, while the surviving men fled on foot. According to reports, the men were preparing to chop the elephant's tusks off when the wildlife officers arrived. Some human rights organizations, such as Muslims for Human Rights, have accused the rangers of acting as judges and juries by killing suspected poachers. The lion. Matome Malale, a 24-year-old South African man, entered a private farm with 4 other men and their dogs in 2015. The gang intended to go hunting, but they were unable to do so since they lacked a hunting license. The men were surprised by 2 lions who had charged after the group about 9 p.m. One of the men was able to flee, while the other 3 took cover in a tree. Malale, on the other hand, was neither as lucky nor as quick as the others. The lions attacked him and 2 of the hunting dogs and mauled them to death. In South Africa, hunting has been a major problem for authorities, especially given the limited resources available to apprehend individuals involved. The enormous terrain only exacerbates the situation, with one official claiming that preventing all unlawful hunting would be impossible. Malale died not long after Cecil the lion was shot and killed by an American hunter. As a result, the unlawful hunter received little sympathy or support, with some portraying the incident as a lion attempting to turn the tables. The elephant. Ian Gibson, 55, was an experienced hunter who was leading a hunt for Chifuti safaris when he was killed by an animal in 2015. In Chuor North, Lower Zimbabwe, Gibson was accompanied by an American client when he noticed a juvenile bull elephant in the distance and decided to pursue it. Gibson's colleague described the elephant as being in moost, a condition in which an elephant's desire to mate goes into overdrive, causing the animal to become violent. Gibson went as near as 30 to 50 meters to the bull elephant before it turned around and charged him. Gibson was able to fire a single shot at the elephant, but it continued to charge him, stomping him to death. Gibson's client was not damaged. The tiger. Vladimir Markov, an experienced poacher in the Russian Far East in 1997, was making his way across the cold winter mountains in pursuit of an extraordinary kill. He grabbed his rifle one frosty day and fired at a tiger that refused to die. The wounded and bleeding tiger bolted into the jungle, only to return shortly. The tiger staked around Markov's cabin, destroying anything and everything that contained Markov's scent, in a scene straight out of Hollywood. The tiger then sat and awaited the man's return. According to reports, the tiger was methodical, waiting for up to 48 hours. When Markov eventually emerged from the woods and approached his cottage, the tiger charged, dragged him into the bushes, and devoured him. The Tiger. A true story of vengeance and survival by John Vaillant was inspired by the events of that day, and it chronicled the animal's chillingly plotted search and death. Subscribe to the channel and like it. There are still many interesting stories ahead.